Welcome to the Community Partnerships in Action session, and we have got a terrific lineup of people for this afternoon. And our first presenter is going to be zooming in with, like many of our colleagues who are also online, and we say hello to all of them, and I'm not sure whether they can see you, but why don't we just do a cheery g'day to them anyhow, so if they can see us, it's nice, isn't it? Also, just to say that if you or they want to put in some questions via Slido, it's pretty handy. It means that we can pick them up at the end. So our first speaker who's coming in, zooming in with us, is speaking on the topic of empowering our community to tackle climate change and a specific case study, which is the Western Port Biosphere Reserve Foundation's Blue Carbon. And that's a terrific sounding project. Glenn Brooks McMillan, who's from the Mornington Peninsula, and that very foundation will be now presenting. So good on you, Glenn.
Hi. I'd like to start this presentation with the topic in which this conference is hosting. It's around community partnerships in action. Now, I'd like to share with you our organisation, the Western Port Biosphere Foundation, as it's had a long history of working with our local community and partners to deliver on-ground action. I'd like to acknowledge the Boonwurrung and Boonwurrung peoples of the Kulin Nations as the traditional owners of the land in which we're meeting today, and pay my respects to their elders, past, present and emerging. In addition to the Community Partnership in Action program, we saw this opportunity to speak to the empowering our community to tackle climate change. I want to introduce the Western Port Biosphere Reserve Foundation's Blue Carbon project. My name is Glenn Brooks McMillan, and I'm the Programs Manager, and I'm delighted to be here with you today to share this exciting project. So firstly, where is Western Port? We are located in the south of Victoria, east of Port Phillip Bay, and there are 5 different councils located across both the east of Port Phillip and around Western Port Bays. French Island is located in the middle of Western Port Bay, but doesn't have a designated council. These councils include Casey, Frankston, Bass, Cardinia and Mornington Peninsula. In 2003, key stakeholders within Western Port and the Mornington Peninsula applied to the UNESCO to register a reserve. What is UNESCO? It is the United Nations educational, scientific and cultural organisation. It seeks to build peace through international cooperation in education, sciences and culture. UNESCO's programs contribute to the achievement of the Sustainable Development Goals defined in the 2030 Agenda, adopted by the UN General Assembly in 2015. As you can see here, this is a boundary of the initial submission for Western Port and still stands today. It covers over 2,000 square kilometres and includes 1/3 marine, 2/3 terrestrial. This map also shows the locations of each of the adjoining councils. Incidentally, we are now submitting our 10-year review to UNESCO, where we have enhanced some of the zones and collaboration undertaken in the past 10 years. So what is a biosphere reserve? Biosphere reserves are learning places for sustainable development. Think of them as a practicing laboratory. It is about balancing conservation and development. And how do we meet human needs without damaging the environment on which all species depend? Oops, sorry. The biggest challenge is how does everyone's priorities impact on the significance of the environment within Western Port? And more importantly, how do we better understand these impacts with the objective to protect our environment while living sustainably? The reserve is essentially split into zones. Each of these zones represent protected, transitional and development land. In theory, the idea is to buffer and protect the high value, conservation and biodiversity areas through responsible planning within the transitional zones, which in turn enable the development impacts to be minimal. As you would expect, practice does not necessarily align with the theory, hence why we think our reserve as a living laboratory, where we are continually trialling, testing, monitoring and reporting on how our everyday lives impact on our environment. Here is a snapshot of the world's Biosphere Reserve program. With over 727 reserves, 275 million people live within these reserves across 131 countries. The total land under reserve is approximately 5% of the world's land surface, of which is equivalent to the size of Australia. And the land legally protected under these reserves is over 1.5 million square kilometres, which is equivalent to the size of Peru. In Australia, we have currently 4 reserves. Fitzgerald Biosphere Reserve in Western Australia, the Great Sandy Biosphere Reserve, Queensland, the Mornington Peninsula and Western Port Biosphere Reserve in Victoria, and Noosa Biosphere Reserve in Queensland. So why Western Port? It was chosen as a biosphere reserve because it has outstanding natural values and a large human population. It is an area of great biological diversity due to its unusually wide range of habitat types. These range from deep channels to seagrass meadows, mangroves, salt marsh and melaleuca thickets. It supports a large number of marine invertebrates and about 65% of Victoria's bird species. This includes orange-bellied parrots, Australian grayling, southern brown bandicoots, French spider orchids and red-necked stints, just to name a few. In addition, Western Port Biosphere Reserves have been recognised by the United Nations via UNESCO as being part of a biosphere reserve due to its outstanding natural values. It has a Ramsar wetland of international importance. It has world-class blue carbon assets and a bryozoan reef of global significance. The Western Port Biosphere Foundation was created as part of the UNESCO Reserve registration. Our purpose is to inspire a positive future by connecting people and nature today. The foundation was established in 2003 and currently has a skills-based volunteer board. We also have a team of paid staff, including CEO, programs manager, project officers, graduate science officer, and a project science officer. We also have volunteers who undertake a number of activities for our foundation. We currently have an office located in Hastings on the Mornington Peninsula. Our foundation is resourced through a number of avenues, including the annual financial support from our 5 surrounding councils. We also seek state and federal funding, donations and philanthropic grants. We also invite the community to be paid members to help support our administration. Our foundation has adopted the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals In particular, our pillars are climate action, environment preservation and restoration, and sustainable development. Under climate action, we undertake a series of activities such as educational programs with schools, wider community events, and blue carbon initiatives. Under environment preservation and restoration, this includes biolinks, pest animal monitoring programs, shorebird action plans, southern brown bandicoot relocation plans, Indigenous plant nurseries, Roseanne reef research, and orange belly parrot research. Under sustainable development, water stewardship is a core project where we are introducing landowners and businesses to the International Water Stewardship Program. We are also currently undertaking a UNESCO review. We also undertake community events, participate in advocacy positions and community engagement programs, including the engagement of First Nations knowledge and resources. We also commit to delivering these through education and science, partnerships and collaborations. We have memorandums of understanding with 5 biosphere councils. These include Casey, Cardinia, Frankston, Bass and Mornington Peninsula. We have memorandum of understandings with 3 biosphere Landcare networks, Mornington Peninsula, Bass Coast and Western Port Catchment Landcare networks. And we have MOU with Moonlit Sanctuary Wildlife Conservation Park. And we also partner with a range of other organisations, including Willam Moraine, Bunurong Land Council Aboriginal Corporation, Melbourne Water, Parks Victoria, Western Port Seagrass Partnership, the South East Council's Climate Change Alliance, and of course many more. Now I would like to now share with you the Blue Carbon Project. 2 more councils have joined in, Bayside City and Kingston City Councils. These councils are part of the wider South East Council's Climate Change Alliance. So what is blue carbon? Blue carbon is carbon captured by marine and coastal ecosystems. As carbon dioxide and greenhouse gases increase in the atmosphere, causing negative impacts on the planet, blue carbon provides a natural way of capturing and locking carbon back into marine plants and sediments. Mangroves, tidal marshes and seagrasses capture and hold onto carbon, serving as natural carbon sinks. Most of the carbon stored in these ecosystems is kept underground and may be thousands of years old. Due to their high carbon sequestration rates, exceptionally long-term burial and valuable services to people and nature, for example, coastal protection, fish production, biodiversity enhancement, blue carbon ecosystems are increasingly being appreciated, but not always well understood. So we identified an opportunity to collaborate with each of the councils to better understand the opportunities for blue carbon ecosystem restoration projects across the Biosphere Reserve. To do this, we have taken the approach of integration, science and research, First Nations and local community input to establish a roadmap for future action. Here's an example of some of the different partners all collaborating on the Blue Carbon Project. And this just shows some of the councils, as well as our local community groups, Deakin University, and our South East Council's Climate Change Alliance. The first step in the Blue Carbon Project was the engagement of Deakin University Blue Carbon Lab to do an extensive mapping project to better understand the past, present and future distribution of coastal blue carbon ecosystems, in particular seagrasses, salt marshes and mangroves. The initial aim is to better understand the carbon capture opportunities to help inform our councils re any carbon offset opportunities. In addition, the mapping work will include developing business cases to help share the co-benefits of restoring and enhancing blue carbon ecosystems. This includes coastal protection, nitrogen sinks, fisheries improvements, improved tourism, and recreational activities, and overall biodiversity benefits. All this information will then be summarised in a roadmap that our councils can consider when making decisions moving forward. As a collective, we aim to share resources to help develop these cases to suit the needs of each of the councils and all of those that enjoy living in the reserve. This includes our relationship with the local Landcare networks, Landcare groups, community groups, and managers and agencies all living within the Biosphere Reserve. At this point of time, the potential outcomes of the Blue Carbon Project include identifying a number of opportunities across the reserve. Develop detailed business cases, including the co-benefits, and to build on existing on-ground projects. A major component of this program will be the community engagement and awareness strategy. While some of the recommendations will make sense to some of us looking through a sustainability lens, the reality is that the reserve consists of many different land users and people who have different priorities. Our awareness program will need to reach out to the community to help share the implications and to best design and implement projects that provide the full spectrum of benefits. On-ground restoration works have been going on for decades in small sections, and we still have our community planting and protecting all across the reserve. With this blue carbon project, we aim to attract greater investment to significantly increase the uptake of ecosystem restoration across the reserve. This mapping exercise will also assist our councils make better informed decisions when planning for the future. And just to finish up, I wanted to share with you a photo of the problem we are facing, especially in Western Port. Here you can see the landowner with his arms showing where the land level was only 20 years ago. So where has the beach gone? But more importantly, where will this be in another 20 years? Whereas this photo shows what can be done in 20 years. This is a site just adjacent to the previous photo where locals have planted mangroves over a 20-year period. And if you look to the top left corner, this is probably the answer to where has the beach gone in the previous slide. Due to the absence of mangroves, the beach washes away and ends up in the bay, where it impacts on a whole range of other Thank you for your time, and I open up for questions.
We have got time for a couple of questions, and there was a comment also from one of our online colleagues, Joy McCoy, who said, don't forget Sunshine Coast has just been designated also as a biosphere. So isn't that wonderful? Good on you, Joe. Some other questions either from the floor or from... Yes?
Hello, I'm Robin Lewis from Tasmania. I'm very interested, did they approach you, Glenn, or did you approach them to set this up? And what criteria were involved? I mean, you did talk a little bit about the criteria, but was there anything particularly that made Western Port stand out?
So just to clarify them, do you mean the councils?
No, I meant UNESCO, sorry.
Oh, sorry. So you mean back in the days. So yeah, we as a community, 20 years ago saw a need to apply for this reserve. So yeah, it was a combination of community groups in the area at the time.
Got a question up the back there.
First, thanks, Glenn, for your presentation. I'm Joy from Tasmania also, and I was just wondering how you were saying that blue carbon can be stored for thousands of years. I'm just wondering, in the ecosystems that you were talking about, mangroves, seagrass, wetlands, how much of the blue carbon that is stored in the long term? So it has the capacity to be stored in the long term, but how much of it will actually be stored?
Good question. I'm not the scientist, so I can't answer the exact years on that, but we do hope that throughout this project that Deakin University can help inform us on the information such as that. So yeah, sorry, I can't answer the exact years.
There was a comment from Lisa Bassington online saying, yes, with regard to mangroves, thanks to the legacy of Dr. Tim Ely, who was referred to as Dr. Mangrove. So he's probably got maybe some of the answers on the carbon storage. So maybe if you note that down, Dr. Tim Ely, E-A-L-E-Y.
Hello, Glenn. My name's Joel. I'm from Healthy Land and Water in southeast Queensland. I congratulate the Sunshine Coast Group. Just wanted to ask, with the biosphere, with it 20 years ago, that just triggered my mind in terms of another landmark from 20 years ago being, that was 10 years since Mabo, and it's 30 years since Mabo now. How, given the journey of native title, how has a biosphere recognised rights and interests today and brought that into the picture compared to, you know, when it was first formed, when a lot of rights and interests weren't formally recognised?
So best answer to that is that it's an ongoing relationship that we're building with our First Nations people, and that can be anything from working on specific projects together, also trying to get representation on the Biosphere Reserve board, but certainly, you know, trying to include our Bunurong group in decision making that we're looking at, especially with blue carbon, and it's an ongoing journey, and we've got good relations with Will and Moraine as well. So yeah, it's I would like to think that it's quite healthy. What it was like 20 years ago, I can't say personally, but certainly those contacts and relationships are quite good at this point in time.
It's great to know that there is a review process with the biosphere reserves. I'm involved with the Fitzgerald River Biosphere in WA, so you can talk to me about that because it wasn't very good from the start, and when the review happened, they had to actually improve the situation enormously. So can we all please thank Glenn for that really interesting presentation.